Why is sex wrong? And if it's wrong, why is it okay for marriage? Better yet, what does a Christ-like relationship look like with the opposite gender? Hey, you're watching the 514 podcast. I'm Chris, and this is Sean. Stay tuned for this.
Loved you once, shame on me. Loved you twice.
The second question we had today was what does it mean? What would a Christ-like relationship with the opposite sex look like? And I think that's a wonderful question. And I think the reason that's a wonderful question is that Jesus really defines his relationship with us in the same way, like in a marriage relationship. And And I want, before we even get into the marriage side of that, I would love just to kind of see from you guys what your take is on this. When you look at that Christ-like relationship, what does a Christ-like dating relationship look like? Any thoughts?
Well, for me, it'd be always having someone with you that will help hold you accountable for the things that you do.
So accountability part of it. Yeah, that's a good point. That's good.
Yeah, it's hard because we don't really see dating in the Bible. That's not really how things works then, but we do see what it looks like to have godly relationships and to live as a godly individual. Maybe the closest thing is you think about the book Song of Solomon, which again shows us that sex is a good thing. It's something that's praised there. It's talked about in good terms, but it does say don't waken a love before it's time. Mm-hmm. And so I think you have to be careful. But at the end of the day, when you're thinking about a dating relationship, especially if you're looking towards marriage, Ed Newton had a popular statement. He said, "Don't try to find the one, be the one." And so that was really helpful. Don't spend your life looking for the one, but prepare yourself to be the one and wait for God to bring that person to you. Not that we're completely passive, but it's worth more focusing in on ourselves and trying to live and look like Jesus than we are trying to find someone else who we think can meet all of our needs, because ultimately they can't. We talked about that a little bit on the last podcast about having a godly home. And so, in Ephesians 5, we were talking about this a minute ago, looking at how men, you're supposed to lead in love like Christ loved the church. And the wife is supposed to love and respect her husband as the church does to Christ. And there's this mutual relationship there where the men are called to lay their lives down for their spouse, and wives are supposed to respect and love and follow their husband in that way.
Yeah, and I'll say as a dad, because this is where my daughter watches this. I want her to know my heart on this as well. We're still called to be obedient to our parents, even in our relationships. So if you're going to say it's a Christ-like relationship, and your parents aren't blessing that relationship, then I'm going to say it's not really a Christ-like relationship, because it should be something that still is honoring our moms and our dads. And so as you think about dating as a Christian, I just want to encourage you guys, talk to your parents about this. What are their thoughts on this? Because everybody's decisions may be a little bit different. I even, at one point, I had my oldest daughter, when she was little, she would tell people, I can't date until I'm 31. And so,
That's a great rule.
Yeah, it's a wonderful rule. You keep
house.
believing that, baby. We may change that later, but not anytime soon. But, the thing is, I know at some point, both of my daughters will end up dating. And I pray for those guys that they date for a lot of reasons right now. But on top of that, I want them to be honoring me and their mom and how they date and what they do in that dating. I love the accountability side of that. I think that's so important to think about, because we are, like we just talked about with sex, we can fall into wrong decisions. And it may not be a sexual relationship. It may just be some other parts of that relationship that do not belong in a Christian lifestyle.
And one thing that I want to clarify, so when I was talking about Ephesians 5 a minute ago, that's the target, that's the mindset that you have for what a dating relationship leads to.
Yeah.
A dating relationship isn't that specifically. So, it talks about husbands laying their lives down for the wife. Yes, in a certain extent, if you're someone's, boyfriend, you want to be self-sacrificial, but you're not called to 100% lay your life down for your girlfriend. They're not your wife yet. In the same way, the Ephesians 5 talks about wives submitting to their husbands. If you're a girlfriend, you're not his husband yet. You do not have to submit to your girlfriend. That's something very different in a marriage context, but that's the ideal. That's the goal that you're aiming for.
Right.
However, you want to make sure you're not living your dating relationship as if it's a mini marriage. I've seen so many friends who they have these dating relationships that almost look like fake marriages, and so when they break up, they feel the pain of a divorce. I have friends, and especially when you bring things that are just supposed to be for marriage, like sex, into that dating relationship, all the more whenever there's a breakup, that adds even more pain to it. And so recognize that Ephesians 5 that's the goal. That's what you're aiming for in marriage. That should be your trajectory. And if your trajectory isn't Ephesians 5, then I would say you're wasting your time in that dating relationship.
Yeah.
But that dating relationship isn't the same thing in the present moment until you've said those vows before your friends and before God.
Right. Whoa, that's
Well,
going off
apparently
in there.
we're done because Jerry killed the electricity on us.
No, he's got some motion sensors going bad in here. But were you wanting to add something to that?
So my mom, when I originally felt like I was ready to date, she was like, don't date until you know that you love that person.
Yeah.
Don't date until you can take them out and actually date them and get to know them.
Yeah, and I love that because my parents always told me, they said, don't date anybody that you would not marry.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll tell you, that's some words of wisdom. I mean, everything, that should be the ultimate goal in it. When I started dating my wife, I didn't know we'd get married when we started dating, but I knew that she was at least the type of person that I wanted to marry. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's important too. Don't just date somebody because somebody else thinks they're cool or just because they look good, because, looks are going to, they're eventually going to fade away, except for my wife's, they don't. But everybody else's does. And so, be careful in who that person is as well. And to Brock's case in point, when you are dating, and I've heard students say this, and I tell you this is almost, it's not almost, it's foolish. I've heard students say, well, that's my husband. No, he's not.
Mm-hmm.
Boyfriend, okay. Husband? Heck no. There's no ring on your finger. You've never made vows at the altar, the same type of vows that Jesus made towards us. You've never done that. So do not waste that word on somebody who is not that in your life. Mm-hmm. I'll even say this too, when you're dating, don't say I love you. There's a whole lot of people watching this screen going, what the heck's he saying? Listen.
Or they're saying too late.
Too late. That's true too. But guys, reserve those words for your future spouse.
Yeah.
When first time I told Amy I loved her, I knew I was going to marry her. There was no doubt in my mind. Now she may not have known, but I knew. And so that's reserved. Don't waste them. It's like Brock said, it becomes almost like a divorce at that point. But Christ has got to be the center of that relationship too. And that changes how you act in a marriage or how a dating relationship.
One final thought I would give is so two things. So first, I've heard it said, like, if you're dating someone, because you don't know if they're going to get married, date them and be the type of boyfriend or girlfriend that if you guys broke up and they got married later, their future spouse could thank you for the way that you handled yourself and the other person in the relationship. So if you met, their future spouse, what would they say to you? However, I also want to put another kind of guard against that to say your treatment of them with respect isn't just because they may or may not be someone's future spouse, because they might be, they might not be. Even if they never get married, though, and they never have another future, or they never have a future spouse, they're still made in the image of God.
Yep.
They're a man or a woman made in the image of God, and that means they deserve our respect. They deserve us giving them value and not mistreating them for our own selfish gain.
But to touch on that, don't date someone that's not in the same religion you are.
Oh yeah, don't be unequally yoked. You bet. And that starts with dating relationship. And it goes back again to, don't date somebody you wouldn't marry.
Mm-hmm.
And the Bible says don't be unequally yoked, and so you need to be careful when it comes down to how they believe in Jesus, and even be careful denominationally, because I'm gonna tell you, there's a lot of situations that I know of that somebody married somebody in a different denomination, and the next thing you know, they weren't going to church at all, and Satan used that to pull them out of church. So be careful.
And they can be genuinely saved, but if you have strong convictions about certain things, that's going to change the way that your marriage relationship is. It's going to change the way how you parent.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of things that you can both be genuine followers of Jesus, but you might have disagreements on secondary issues that make it not wise for you to get married, because that's going to create some serious conflict later on.
So like this world now labels multiple religions as Christianity.
Right.
Even though you're a Christian, don't date someone that's a Catholic, or that's because even though you're Baptist, don't date a Catholic person. Even though their label is Christian, they're not considered Christian in your beliefs.
At least make it a conversation you have beforehand. And that's, I've known some Baptists who have dated Catholics that are in Baptist churches now, and it ultimately even led to salvation. But you need to have those conversations. You need to be really careful, because Satan can really use things like that to draw you apart.
And just because God worked through a situation once doesn't mean that's an example that should be set for other people to follow.
Right.
Just because it worked out in a good way. God works some really bad situations out in good ways. That doesn't mean we should throw ourselves into bad situations because there's no promise that it's going to work out in the same way
That's
for us.
exactly missionary dating. That's not a good idea. So, not a good idea.
Like with my mom and dad, they dated when they were both in the Navy. My dad wasn't religious. He didn't go to church.
Yeah.
My mom did. I guess, I don't know for sure, but I think my dad proposed. And I guess my mom either said yes and then gave it up later, or she said no right away and then invited him to church, got him, and then actually to this church exactly.
That's awesome. And now your dad has served in ministry even,
Yeah.
so
You
it
heard
still
here
does
first.
today.
Come to First Baptist Rogers and you'll find a spouse.
I don't know if it works quite like that, but we'll go with it. Hey, I want to leave you with this, and I know I said this is going to be a short podcast, and I don't think it has been, but I think this is some great stuff that everybody needs to hear. But I want to challenge you, go read Ephesians chapter 5, verse 22 through 33. I think it's a great picture of marriage and the way God designed it, but also the fact that Jesus uses the picture of marriage to define his relationship with us. And, a lot of times you hear the words, wives should submit. And for some of you ladies, it's like, oh my gosh, why would Jesus do that to me? But I think what's more important is look down there and understand how husbands are called to love and cherish their wives. And I can tell you right now, I love my kids. My kids are amazing, but they don't rank up there with my wife. Mm-hmm. She, with the exception of Jesus and God alone, Jesus is God, but you get where I'm going. With the exception of that, she is the most important person to me. And so I think that, understand the wives are called to submit, but husbands, you're called to love your wife above every other person besides God himself. And that can be a hard calling, and that can be something you need to take serious because you're going to be challenged in that. So this was a great question. Whoever submitted these 2 questions, man, thank you guys. I think this is a great topic, and again, I know sex kind of gets a weird thing to talk about sometimes, but as Christians, we need to talk about it because it's there, it's real, and it's something that I think we need to take serious. So, any last words you guys want to leave with, and before we get off here? Man, y'all are awesome. Thank y'all for being a part. Brock, thanks for being here today.
Yeah, for
sure. Man, I appreciate what you guys do in our middle school ministry here at First Rogers, and Brock has a baby on the way, so good stuff too. But anyway. We'll see you guys later. Thanks for tuning in.